And welcome to another edition of South Texas Crossfire. This is Attorney Joe Flores reminding you to join us each and every week right here on KTMV with the Lopez family. Special thanks to Don Humberto Lozano Lopez. He passed away in 2011, but he celebrated over 50 years of broadcasting, and we honor and venerate him and all his family. And don't forget our good friend, Carlos Lopez. You guessed it, the Ted Turner of South Texas Broadcasting. And also, we'd like to thank each and everyone out there who makes it happen, our fans, our viewers, everybody who comes out there and says we're doing a great job on the streets, and also now on YouTube and on the internet. Bienvenido a mes amis, and also benvindo a mis amigos out there that speak Portuguese and French, because they're watching out there. I got comments. But anyway, and also thanks to our sponsors, River City Hospice, 882-5900. Call them for any questions on hospice. It's not what you think it is. And Vasquez Flores Home Health, 881-9922. With me today, I have the distinct pleasure of bringing on somebody that's going to be talking about federal law, about incarceration, about what he does every day in the trenches and in the courtrooms. And that's a great friend and colleague of mine I attended law school with, and I'm honored to have him here, and you should be too, because he's going to be providing a great deal of information on trial work in the federal system. Welcome, Juan. How are you?
It's been a long time, Jim.
Long time.
Long
Welcome
time,
back.
man.
Hey, well, welcome to the show. And, you know, one of the things that you and I always talk about is trial work. And a lot of people understand or are acquainted with the law and order sort of deal. But what about the federal? You know, let's start out with the federal system and how it differs from the state system for those people out there who aren't actually familiar with how the criminal justice system and the federal system works.
Well, while there's many similarities, the truth is that in many respects it's apples and oranges.
Okay.
You know that, being an experienced practitioner over in federal court as you know yourself, it's very much a rocket docket system. There is a right to a speedy trial, and they hold the litigants and the lawyers to that process. And so typically a case will start out, as you're aware, Joe, with just a criminal complaint, and someone's brought before a United States magistrate judge, and they're informed of the charges that are pending against them. Very quickly, within, I would say, about a 2-week time frame, the U.S. Attorney's Office will take that criminal complaint, present it to a federal grand jury, and if the federal grand jury finds that there was probable cause that obviously a crime had been committed, a federal crime that is, they will hand down a federal indictment. It is at that point then that the formal process begins, and from the time you go in on an arraignment until your trial setting, it's 30 days. And the attorneys are expected to be ready for trial within that time frame.
Well, and let me tell you, a lot of people say that'll never happen to me, federal law. There's a lot of hunting down here. In fact, you and I have both seen these types of cases, gun charges. You go to a gun show, maybe you have a felony in your possession, I mean in your background, and then you're a firearm possession, or you have some pre-ban weapon, you know, Chinese AK-47 full on. So tell us a little bit about that how can somebody so easily, or in a credit card, somebody can so easily get sucked down in the federal system?
Well, there's so many rules and regulations and laws that are on the books that make certain conduct unlawful. And, you know, you brought up a great instance. It's against the law for instance, any felon. You could have a state jail felony, for instance. You are no longer able then to possess firearms. And if you do, then you are violating federal law and subjecting yourself to the federal criminal process. And it's that way on so many different fronts. Much of what we see, however, are drug-related offenses, anywhere ranging from marijuana to cocaine to methamphetamines or heroin. Those are the bulk of the cases that you really see here in South Texas, along, of course, with alien smuggling, which is very big business. And that's been the bulk of my practice here over the last number of years.
Well, and let's focus in on that a little bit. Like, you know, what we talked about was the average guy who's never been in trouble with the law. You know, it can happen that you're drinking and driving on a national seashore.
That's right.
If you're out in the water and the Coast Guard pulls you over and you have a small amount of marijuana. The other issues are, of course, the big cases. So let's focus in on that. Let's focus in on one that you have coming up. You know, a drug possession case or a trafficking case. Okay, a person is stopped at a checkpoint. Let's use a far out example. Unbeknownst to them, there is 50 pounds of marijuana in their trunk. Somebody put it there unbeknownst to them to come, and then they were going to exchange the car. They deny any knowledge of it. The drug dogs get alerted at the Cerrita checkpoint. What happens next? Just sort of like an images of what this person experiences. Somebody never in trouble with the law. They're shocked that they have 50 pounds of marijuana in the back of their car.
Well, I would say there's a high probability that individual is probably going to get arrested. The local law enforcement at the checkpoint is the United States Border Patrol. They will conduct the initial investigation. They will then call for backup, either officials with HSI, which is Homeland Security, or DEA or ICE, and they will be called out to investigate the matter and try to obtain statements and interview the principals involved. Very good chance that person will probably end up getting arrested.
Well, and then once they get arrested, then what happens? Because a lot of people who've never been in trouble with the law or understand that they're under arrestment potentially for a federal crime because of the amount, they're thinking it's a distribution outside of Texas.
Right. No, I mean, and typically, you know, I've had cases, believe it or not, as little as, you know, half a pound. But anytime you're coming through the checkpoint, for the longest time during especially the Falfurrias checkpoint, the state officials did not want to prosecute those offenses, and so they landed over in federal court. But the process will end up happening to that individual in a very rapid manner. They'll be taken before a United States magistrate judge, and they will be informed of their constitutional rights, including the pending case that's against them, whether they understand the nature and consequences of the offense, and their right to counsel. If they cannot afford a counsel, they will fill out the requisite paperwork to be given court-appointed counsel, or they will, of course, be given an opportunity to hire a counsel of their choice, and so that they can start being defended. And in the case that you gave, what you must understand that, you know, that person should be okay, because it's not enough. Mere presence of drugs is not enough in order to substantiate a finding of guilty on someone when you're not able to establish that they actually knew that the drugs were there. That's one of the elements that the government would have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, and if they could not do that, then of course that person would be entitled to be found not guilty as a matter of law.
Well, and you bring up a good point, because the government does have a tremendous burden, but on the other hand, which we'll talk about in the second half of the show, now that the government encroaching quite a bit on many things, regulating a lot of things, and there's so many laws in the books, as you said, that at times if there is corroborating witnesses or people have cooperated, you really don't have a choice. There a lot of the time people are really cornered, and if they go to trial, they can be facing much heavier time. But we've got a few minutes left, and I'd like to focus in on human trafficking. I know a lot of our viewers out there, and we're getting a lot of Anglo viewers now, so many that call us now that are non-Spanish speaking, that are non-Hispanic, that say, I watch your show, I like it, but they're also concerned about border problems, as we all are. There's a war raging over there in Mexico.
Human trafficking is turning out to be one of the biggest problems we face here in South Texas. You are right. There is a war being waged at the border, and it is big business, the trafficking of human beings. It is absolutely amazing. Modern day slavery, or involuntary indentured, if you will, it's very much alive and well, and it is big business. And it's very sad what happens to these individuals. Many, if not most of which, are just coming here because they want to work to provide for their families back in their respective countries. It is a very sad process, but there are times where people who are accused of human trafficking are wrongfully accused. That is to say that individuals are loaded up perhaps in their tractor trailers without their knowledge. And it is, again, one of the elements that the government has to be able to prove is that you knowingly and willfully and intentionally aided and abetted or helped transport or transported individuals who are undocumented into this country. You have to knowingly and willfully do it. What happens, unfortunately, a lot of times is that there are, unbeknownst to the truck driver, when produce is being loaded up, oftentimes there is contraband or there are people being loaded up in those trailers as well.
Yeah, and there's always those issues. A lot of the time, you know, and we're going to take a break in about a minute, but you know, on the good side, I'd like to salute the federal system, because all those prosecutors we work with, the magistrates, the judges, it's such a uniform system. It's the NFL of law.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be prepared. You can't be late. You have to show a tremendous amount of deference to the judges, and the way the system works, the advocacy and the translation work, the translators, everything that they do, they want to make sure that that person understands their rights when they're accused, and not to take anything away from the state system, but I'm very proud of our federal system and our judges.
And it's just very different. You know, the first question you posed when we opened was just, you know, what are the differences? But you know, Joe, that one of the big differences, of course, is there's not a whole lot of discretion there amongst the litigants. And it is because that unlike the state system, in the federal system,
zero tolerance.
The only one who decides what your sentence is going to be is the judge.
That's right.
And you know, so while there is a form of entering into plea agreements with the government in the federal system, it's not like doing the same in the state. So in the state, you could have a client enter into a plea bargain agreement with the state, and the client will know, well, okay, if I plead out, I'm going to receive X, whatever X is. X could be probation, it could be deferred adjudication, it could be signing for time. You know, 4 years, Texas Department of Criminal Justice. And you know what you're getting into. The federal system is just completely the opposite. There'll be a full range of sentencing that the judge will have before him or her, and the way the law is set up post that Booker decision is that these federal guidelines are only advisory now, and that the court is free to hand down a sentence that the court deems appropriate after considering those guidelines, and the court is free to depart downward or upward, provided that the court does not hand down an unlawful sentence.
Well, and we've talked about the arrest, we've talked about the arraignment. When we come back, we're going to talk about what the federal trial system, which Juan Reyna is a part of, and he's got a couple of trials coming up, and we can't talk about those, but we'll talk about general principles of trial work. And if you have any questions for Juan Reyna, call him now at 993-8100. If you're facing a gun charge, drug charge, alien smuggling charge, any kind of question on federal law or even state that can turn federal, and you have a loved one that needs questions answered, call him at 993-8100, 993-8100, Juan Reyna, and we're going to be back after a break.
Have you been arrested or are potentially facing criminal charges? You need a trial attorney who is well-versed in the courtroom. Joe Flores has handled hundreds of criminal cases and many of them to trial. Joe Flores can provide you with competent representation to protect your constitutional rights in state and federal court. Joe Flores can help if you have been arrested or facing criminal charges. The law offices of Joe Flores, equal justice for all.
Hola, soy Joe Flores, abogado, recordándole que es muy importante que salga a votar. Este año en Texas se han cortado programas importantes. Esto es a causa de las decisiones de los registradores republicanos que le han dado más importancia a ganancias que a personas. Le han dado más importancia a corporaciones y compañías de seguro. Este año electoral, regístrese para votar el Partido de la Gente. Personas, trabajadores, maestros, enfermeros y familias. Vote demócrata.